Well, there's something I admire about the United Kingdom that I don't think we have in the New World, and that is the kind of well-read, prolific, intellectual, public intellectual person. I think of Douglas Murray when I think of that, someone who, I don't know where he gets the time to have so many deep thoughts, and I say that unironically. And someone I put in that category is someone I've never interviewed on the show, but I've been a fan of for years. He's the chief political writer for Spiked Online, and his name is Brendan O'Neill. I found the opportunity to interview him because he has a new book out called After the Pogrom, 7th of October, Israel, and the Crisis of Civilization. And it truly is an honor to have him join us today from London for a conversation. Brendan, what a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hi, Ezra. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. I'm I guess being a little bit effusive because I'm a fan. I'm struck by how prolific you are. Before we get into it, tell us a little bit about Spiked Online, because that's how I found you. But you write in many other newspapers. Give us a bit of a background of Spiked Online and your own journalism.
Yeah, so Spiked Online has been going for almost 25 years, so a long time. I was there from the very start, and I was editor for 15 years. I'm now chief political writer. And people are often surprised to learn that Spiked was born out of a magazine called Living Marxism. So we come from a left-wing background, but it was a very kind of contrarian left-wing background, one that was anti-state, pro-freedom, pro-enlightenment. So not the kind of left people would think of these days, which are the opposite of all of those things. The left now is rabidly crazy and insane and anti-enlightenment, illiberal, and so on. So we come from that kind of tradition. But I guess these days we would call ourselves a humanist magazine, or I don't know, a democratic magazine. We see ourselves as a magazine that really makes the case for enlightened thinking, a defense of reason, a defense of ordinary people against the slings and arrows of a state that doesn't trust them anymore. That's really how we would position ourselves on the political spectrum. And in my view, Spiked is hands down the best magazine on the internet. Every day we publish brilliant, exciting stuff. So I would encourage your listeners, if they haven't already read it, to make sure that they do.
Well, and I'm happy to have you make that plug because it's very true. I think because the magazine emanates from the left, your criticisms of the left are more effective because you understand the thinking of the left. And the left in recent years, especially the last 12 months, has really been a hothouse, an incubator of shocking anti-Semitism. I put the lion's share of it in Canada, and I think it's fair to say in the UK, at the feet of new immigrants who come from countries that are endemically anti-Semitic and have brought that with them. But there's no denying that their allies, their Sherpas in the New World, are woke leftists. I've attended several of the huge Islamist rallies in London, and I see these old Socialist Workers' Party types who have basically said, this is where the energy is. This is the fountain of anti-Western thought. I'm going to team up with them. There's a real Marxist-Islamist alliance, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, one of the chapters in my book is called The Unholiest Alliance, and it's about the Islamo-left, which is a phrase that was born in France, but it's now used quite widely across Europe. And it really describes a left that has got into bed with radical Islam. And you can trace the history of it. I give a potted history in my book of how this phenomenon occurred. It really goes back to the mid-1990s. There was a pamphlet published in Britain called The Prophet and the Proletariat. And the title gives you a sense of what the pamphlet was about. It was actually published by people around the Socialist Workers' Party, and it was the argument that there might be times when the left could align with radical Islamists in the fight against imperialism, in the fight against Israel, et cetera, et cetera. And what's happened since then, that was 1994. Since then, what started off as a cautious alliance between the left and radical Islamists has become all-out bed hopping. You know, these two movements are in cahoots, very, very closely connected. Jeremy Corbyn, the former leader of the Labour Party, infamously referred to Hamas as his friends. We've seen people on the streets of Europe, leftists on the streets of Europe, chanting, "We are all Hezbollah." And we know that the left is very hostile to any criticism of radical Islam or even to any criticism of Islam itself, which the left is very fast to denounce as Islamophobia. So the left has just got into bed with radical Islamists. And I think what they share in common is this burning hostility towards modern society, towards enlightened society, and to the West more broadly. They have this loathing for Western society and Western civilization and Western values. And that's really what binds these two strange groups together. You end up with an organization like Queers for Palestine, witlessly unaware that if they were ever to set foot in Palestine, they would be thrown off the top of a building faster than they could say free Palestine. You know, it's real, a kind of suicidal idiocy that we are seeing in this left that is really getting into bed with Islam.
My next question was going to be about Queers for Palestine. I see them on the streets in Canada. I've seen them in the UK. And I don't think they have thought through what it would be like to be queer in Palestine, but I don't think they would care, because they are just looking for the strong horse to take down the West. And before the fall of the Berlin Wall, the greatest challenge to the West was the Soviet Union. And so that was their ally. That has faded largely, and so Islam is I think the word queer gives it away, and I don't think they mean it sexually. I think they mean contradict the norms, attack the establishment. Who will help me detonate the state as it is? Once that's done, we can quarrel about what the new utopia will be. But right now, we got to get rid of these capitalists and these damn Jews. I don't think there's any contradiction when you understand that queer doesn't necessarily refer to their sexuality. It means to be contrary to the status quo. Am I wrong on that?
No, I don't think you are. And it's definitely not a gay rights campaign in the way we might have understood it 40 or 50 years ago, you know, when there were gay liberation movements that were just focused on, you know, basically telling the state to back off, you know, go away, leave us alone, let us live our lives. This is definitely something different. This is a movement, and I don't just mean Queers for Palestine, but the broader pro-Palestine movement, which I saw someone with a placard the other day saying, whores for Palestine, you know, so you now have prostitutes for Palestine. And there's fatties for Palestine, which is morbidly obese people who support Palestine. There's Queers for Palestine. I mean, everyone, Greta Thunberg and those climate change alarmists have thrown their weight behind the Palestine issue. It really has become the omni cause for all these lost leftists and bereft liberals who don't know what to do with themselves in a kind of post-class, post-Soviet society. You know, they feel very bereft, they feel very unanchored. And so they're looking for a cause through which they might define themselves and through which they might continue to take potshots at the West, which is what they hate above all. And the issue they choose to do that through is their unhinged hatred for the world's only Jewish nation and their ridiculous support for the armies of anti-Semites that threaten that nation, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Islamic Republic of Iran. So, yeah, I agree. It's not really, Queers for Palestine is not anything to do with sexual freedom or anything that we might have talked about a few decades ago. It is another way in which young people who have been educated, in fact, to be wary of the West, to be suspicious of Western civilization, to hate the gains of Western society, that, you know, they've been told this for a very long time. And it's not surprising to me, I make this point in my book, it's not surprising that if we educate a whole new generation to be fearful of civilization, we are going to drive them into the arms of its opposite, which is barbarism. In this case, the barbarism of Hamas, the barbarism of 7th of October. So I think what attracts groups like Queers for Palestine to this issue is that they like the frisson of this barbarism. They appreciate what it does. And what it does is not only threaten the existence of Israel, but it also calls into question the moral authority of the West. And that's really what draws them to it.